Hello, I'm Ailish and these videos are for the NC State Beginner Knitting Workshop. In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew in the ends and complete the project. Alright, this is the final step, the last video to finishing your scarf. We're going to be sewing the ends together. Before we can sew the ends together, we have to sew this tail end into this piece. So right now we have two tail ends, but we only need one tail end to sew them together. So I'm going to untie this, and I'm going to be weaving this yarn back through this work with my needle. And you're going to want to make sure that your needles aren't too sharp, because we don't want to go through the yarn, but through the stitches. And a technique that I've learned to getting the yarn through the tail end of the needle is to make a little loop. You're going to put the needle through that loop, and I'm going to kind of take it between my thumb and finger so that it's in between them, and while I pull this needle out, I'm going to pull it upwards. So I'm going to pull it up and keep it tight with my finger and thumb until it lets go. And I'm going to keep this tight. I'm going to take the tail end of the needle and I'm going to push it down while separating my fingers. And that's going to like push the yarn through, and then I can grab it on the other side and pull it through. There are a lot of other techniques if this one doesn't work for you, but this is the one that I found the easiest, and I don't need to have anything else to be able to do it. So when sewing this together, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm not putting the needle through these stitches. I want to put it, or not through the yarn, but through the whole stitch. So I'm going to start by kind of pulling out this corner so I can see what I'm working with. And I'm going to find a path that I can weave this yarn along. So I'm going to go down to this path here. So first I'm going to take the yarn over to here, and then I'm going to weave it down this line here. So to do that, I'm just going to find a stitch next to it, and I'm going to put the yarn through that stitch, pull it through, and then I'm already at this line that I wanted to go down. So these are the knit stitches, and as you can see, they kind of wrap around like that, going all the way up. So I'm going to continue that pattern, but going down with my yarn. So I'm going to go through this first stitch, going down along here, and then the second stitch, and I'm just going down this row of raised knit stitches. And you don't want to pull this super tight, just enough to make it not too visible. But you can see here, once I have it, that you can't tell that the yarn has been through there. Through the next stitch. And if you want to get more done at one time, you can usually kind of pull it through here, pull it through the next stitch, pull it through the next stitch, and do multiple at a time. Right now I have 3 on there. And now I'm going to go back up the other side. So I'm going to go across from this raised bump to the other raised bump. And I'm going to go just following the stitch pattern, I'm going to go back up. You can tighten it, loosen it, just kind of play around with it until it looks normal. Alright, I'm back up at the top, and I feel like this is a good place to stop the knitting. And as you can see, you can't really tell that the yarn has gone through there. And now I'm just going to take that yarn out of the needle, and I'm going to cut it here. And cut it right up to where it comes out. The reason that we're not making any knots is because knots can be very easily felt in knitworks. So we're just going to weave it through, and this is not going to come undone. This is going to stay in there. And now we can start with the second part. So now we have the cast off, which has this nice little row of knit stitches on it. So I'm actually going to use these knit stitches as a kind of a guide of putting it back together with this one. I'm going to line it up so that they're the same length, and we're going to do the same thing with our needle. Take this tail end, I'm going to wrap this around the needle, and I'm going to take it between my thumb and finger and squeeze it tight as I pull up on the needle. Take the tail end and just push it over that yarn and pull it through. Alright, last part. Line this up, and now I have this little ear thing hanging off here, and I don't really want that, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap it around this one just so it kind of tightens it up like that, so we don't be able to see it. If you don't have a tail piece, a little ear piece, you don't have to worry about that. And that was the first step. So here I'm just going to kind of go back and forth, and I'm going to use these knit stitches on the inside as a guide. And I'm going to work through the entire knit stitch, both legs of the knit stitch. And then on the other side, through 2 legs as well. And since this piece at the end is going to be lined up like this, that means we can go directly over and start again from this side. So I'm going to go through the next 2 knit stitches, and through 2 bars on the other side. Pull it tight. Again, through the 2 bars of the knit stitch. So you can see this is bar 1, bar 2, and these are the knit stitches. So I'm going to go through bar 1 and bar 2, so both bars of the knit stitch. And same thing on the other side. Oh, and I just pulled my yarn out of the needle, so I'm going to do that. Alright, so through both bars of the knit stitch, and same thing on the other side, and pull it through. And you're going to want to pull it tight. And I'm just going to keep doing that all the way across. One way to make sure that you're still lined up as you're going is to make sure that these raised knit stitches continue on the other side. So they come up here and they continue on. So we're just going to want to make sure that those kind of line up as we go. Again, it's just going to be, I'm going to lift this, fold it over, and you can see the knit stitches. I'm going to go through both bars, and then the same thing on the other side. Go through both bars and pull it through. I'm always going to start from the front and go to the back. Alright, I'm getting closer to the end here, and I'm just going to keep putting it through both legs and through the other side. And finally in the corner. Through both corners. And now this has been knit together. First you can kind of tell that there's a seam there, but that'll be on the back of the neck. And the pattern continues nicely on the other side. But before we're done, we still have to weave this end in. We can't just have a tail hanging out, and we can't just cut it off here, or it'll undo itself. So I'm going to go back to the bottom of the work, which is actually this side. And with my yarn, to pull it up a bit. And you can see I made my tail a bit too long, but in my opinion it's always better to have too much than too little. So I'm going to kind of spread this apart, and I'm going to take the yarn, make sure it's still tight here, don't want it to be too loose, and I'm just going to find stitches, a little stitch path that I can go along, and you're going to want to go with the stitches and not through the yarn itself. So I'm just going to find a little path, and depending on how you sew it together or what yours looks like, you might find a different path. So you're just going to want to pull your needle and the yarn through a path that you find in your work. This will always look a bit different. There's no one uniform way to do this. So find what works best for you. Sew it through. Sometimes it's a bit easier to hold it. Up to you. One thing that will make the weaving it in stronger is if you go in one direction with the yarn and then you go back the same direction again before cutting it. That way there's too much friction on the yarn so that you can't pull it out as easily. Now I've gotten a good way in, I'm going to do one more through the stitch. And then I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to go back the same way I came with the yarn, but not through the last stitch that we did, otherwise it will just pull itself out. And you want the stitches that you go through to be pretty close together. You don't want to make big jumps. And now I'm ready to cut my yarn. I don't want to go all the way to the end because that will make it a little bit more obvious. And voila! And now it's done. You finished your first scarf. Yay!